So I'm the head of food microbiology and hygiene. So we work with microorganisms from all kinds of angles, a lot with the bad ones, the ones that spoil our food or can make us sick from the food, whether it's a virus or a parasite or a bacteria. But at the core of what we do is to try and design the properties into the food processes or the food products that gives us the flavor, of course, but also the shelf life and the food safety that we need. And in doing so, we look at trimming down the resources that are spent, so you could call it precision food processing if you want to. And we also look at new technologies. For instance, we have a project on ultraviolet pasteurization of milk. Anyways, you can hear a lot more about that if you want to visit our stand at the exhibit. Today I wanted to give you an example of how we've used our expertise to help in a big project that looked at, trying to save the water in food processing. So we have an issue in the food industry with a huge consumption of water. And in Denmark, we haven't thought too much about it. So by legislation, we have to use drinking water in the processes. In Denmark, we have lots of drinking water. We have this fantastic groundwater. However, things are changing under our ground, basically. We also are facing an issue with the cost of the discharge of the wastewater into the environment. So really, we need to begin to look at more sustainable ways of doing this. And also, a lot of our food companies are multinational companies operating in places like California and South Africa, where the water scarcity is immense. So there is a real opportunity here to look into technologies to save the water. So what are we using all of this water for in the food industry? Cleaning and sanitation, so food hygiene is a big one. But also it's an ingredient, and it's used a lot for these indirect processing activities we do, so heating, cooling, and sterilization. Although, as Min just talked about, we're also looking into new technologies where we're going for the direct heating, not the indirect heating. So looking at the legislation, we do have opportunities for not just using drinking water in our processes, and that's what we've explored in this project that I'm going to talk about. So we had this big multi-actor industry, government, and university project, and we went into this together to try and reduce the water consumption amongst the industrial partners with the development of new technologies and new ways of looking at it by 25% at the end of the project. In fact, we ended up with an estimated 32% savings. You can read more about that in the big final report that was made public. So what did we do? We started with some of the simple stuff, just turn off the hose. Sounds really simple, but a lot of people weren't doing that. To moving into the more complex situations where we took something that were going to go to the wastewater treatment plant and then instead grabbed it and looked at it. Can we actually design a process by which we can reclaim this water and then use it? And I'm going to just share a little bit about that with you momentarily. So this is a very busy slide, I know, but it's basically describing how in the square you have the food processing plant. Here you have the drinking water treatment plant. So comes in here, goes through various processing steps. I'm a hazard person, so I look at food processes in different unit operations. And then out comes the product, but also the water that then normally would just go straight to this purple no box, because it's a side stream that could be reclaimed, right? So what about we do this instead? So we have all this water, and then we put it in through an advanced treatment plant, strip it of everything, including the microbes and the chemistry we don't want when we go back into the food processing plant, and then maybe we can use it for cleaning. It's a ridiculous amount of the water in the food processing industry that's used for cleaning. It's like 80% or something like that. So what about this one? So we looked at that, and so basically, take all of this, we now don't call it wastewater, we call it processed water, right? There's no sanitary black water in it, that's a separate line, so it's just the water that was used in the food processing and in the cleaning operations. So let's not call it wastewater, but processed water. We treat it, and then we have treated processed water. Just see what that does to you when I don't call it waste anymore. It becomes a much more positive resource. And I think that's what Charlotte was talking into as well. It's not waste, it's a resource. So in doing so in the project, we looked a lot at, okay, let's redefine this, because this is not going to be drinking water. Let's call it water fit for purpose instead. So our job at DTU, at DTU Sustain, at DTU Food, was to look at how do we define that? How do we make sure, too, that the chemistry and the microbiology that could be problematic was stripped from that? So this is basically, again, now the process that we want to advance. So I'm just moving the red cursor around here and then back here. So it's not used, it's going in different pipes, but now it can be used for cleaning again. So we had to look at what was in the water. And of course, to start with, it was the drinking water, but then there was a lot of other stuff, some coming from the food itself, some coming from the cleaning chemicals, and the disinfectants. Here, though, we were lucky that everything that we clean with and whatnot has to be approved by the Environmental Protection Agency and the Danish Veterinary and Food Administration. So in our risk assessments, we had to look at the biological hazards and the chemical and physical hazards that we would have left here, and then make calculations, predictions for each and every of these, like how much would we expect, and so what was our sort of criteria for the log reductions or the removal that we needed. So in response to that, a multi-barrier approach was designed or recommended, and I'm actually talking about actual examples. This is what they do at Carlsberg in Fredericia right now, based on these activities that we did in this project. So they have a biological treatment of the processed water, followed by an ultrafiltration and reverse osmosis treatment, and a UV treatment followed by chlorine dioxide. This graph down here, I figure you're not supposed to be able to really see, but what I wanted to communicate with that is that there is a tremendous development going on right now in the properties of the different membrane treatments that can be utilized. And they could basically be designed to hold back the problem organisms or problem chemicals that you need. Also, with UV treatment, you can begin to do stuff to oxidize problem chemistry as well, and strip the processed water of, for instance, odorants, so odor compounds. So this is just looking at the microbiology here. And again, it's a multi-barrier approach. So for every step, you can make a calculations of how much you strip the water off. And really, when we looked at the overall log reductions, you can see that they're very high. What we also looked at were recommendations from the WHO that have done similar risk assessments, and they have done so actually for drinking water, because in Namibia and South Africa, they simply don't have any clean drinking water left, so they have to use treated wastewater for drinking water. Similarly, for the chemistry, we again looked at the different steps in the process and then looked at, well, where are the different chemical compounds removed. Okay, this brings me to my final slide. Basically, through this new approach, we can obtain huge water savings in the industry without compromising food safety. We've worked a lot with the Danish Veterinary and Food Administration to clear out the legislation and enabling them to sort of approve of this approach. For the industry, there needs to be a pull, right? Either a push or a pull. They need to feel that this is worth it. In some cases, it may be the wastewater situation, but in other cases, it might simply be the water scarcity that's worth it. And for Carlsberg, for instance, they say that it's also the fact that by having it working in Denmark means that they can export the idea to the facilities worldwide where they simply don't have any water. We have a lot of research questions that I think are going to become of interest in the future. What's the long-term effect of using this new water? Are our predictions accurate? Can we further improve our treatment of removal of the chemistry? How do we best monitor this? We probably need to find new ways of monitoring it. And then there's also an environmental dimension. So with that, I will end. Thank you.